Now, what I'm going to do, normally I would give you a top 10 overall or top 5, or whatever it is. I'm going to give you 2 movies per season. I'm not including the Netflix stuff, so basically we'll leave the Netflix out of it. But I'm talking about the old days, starting from KTMLA all the way through the Sci-Fi Channel. Because those are the ones you want to see. And these are the ones that stand out for me. It may be different for you. Now, starting out with the KTMA series, there are 2 that do come out very well. And that's the Gamma versus Gaios, which we know that one. That's a real funny one. And then, of course, Mighty Jack. If you haven't seen Mighty Jack, it's it was a Japanese television show about the flying submarine at the time, as you would call it. It was really good. You have to love some of this stuff out there. Those are the 2 from that era. Now, season 1, man, there's a lot in here in season 1. There's so many, to tout back. But I have to put toward these, the 2 that stand out the most for me is The Robot versus the Aztec Mummy, which is, I think it was a Mexican horror flick, which also had the short from Radar Men on the Moon, episode 1. And it was a crazy about search for treasure from a mummy, and there was a curse of the mummy. Evil scientists created a robot to fight the mummy. And, you can figure the rest out. The other one, and oh man, this one, it could have gone down 2 ways, but it's still one of my favorites, is the Slime People. 1963, the Slime People. And it also had part 6 of Radar Men from the Moon. And it's about how Los Angeles was taken over by these reptilian type creatures. And they had like a fog that always showed up, that every time they're in the fog. And that one was pretty funny. I mean, some of the jokes in there's some jokes about Fabian, if you remember Fabian, for those of my mature viewers like me who know who that is. There were a lot of jokes on that episode, and a lot of weird sounds of the Slime People, and that was always really good to watch. Now, going into season 2, and there's a good amount in this one as well, but unfortunately these are 2 you cannot see unless you go the high seas, or if you happen to be someone who has a VHS version of it, and both of these are from the same genre. It's Godzilla versus Megalon and Godzilla versus the Sea Monster. Now, there were no shorts on this one. These ran straight through. One of the best parts of the Megalon is they made a Jet Jaguar song. And the reason I bring up Jet Jaguar, you know that the new series that's coming out of Toho, the anime, will have a Jet Jaguar in it. It's a weirder version of Jet Jaguar, but it is a fighting Jet Jaguar that's in the newer series. To have a song about Jet Jaguar made in this episode was really, really good, especially with the subtitling underneath. Because, you had the Jet Jaguar song at the end of the movie, but then they put subtitles to it. And that was fun. And then, of course, going into season 3, the 2 that I choose in there, one is the Pod People, the 1983 movie out of Spain, France, about a young boy who basically finds a large egg, and it hatches into a mischievous alien, and a group of poachers and people are trying to find it, and gets in all this trouble, and it gets into comes that old famous line from the movie, "It stinks."
It stinks. It stinks.
It stinks. And it's a horrible movie. It is really one of the horrible, but to get it riffed like this, made a great improvement to it. The other one, which is it is one of the great classic, and it has a short called Snow Thrills in it, and it is the 1956 It Conquered the World by Roger Corman, starring Peter Graves, Lee Van Cleef, and it has the most unusual ending, which basically almost it's a repetitive ending to this episode. And I'm not talking about the movie, I'm talking about the episode itself. It sort of rehashes the Peter Graves speech.
You learned almost too late that man is a feeling creature.
At the end of It Conquered the World. And you have to go out and go watch this to find out what I mean about this. Now, for season 4. Let's see what we got here. Season 4. Well, obviously, we have to throw one of these in. The 1964 Franco-Italian International Co-Production Hercules Against the Moon Men. And no, it's Alan Steele who plays this version of it.
Deep hurting. Deep hurting.
Yes, that's right. It's Alan Steele. And this has one of the most, how can I put this? Tortures of any movie.
Sandstorm. Sandstorm.
And yeah, it is it's a tortured part, running back and forth in the middle of a sandstorm. And it's literally it's insane. It's one of the most insane episodes. Next to the second one that is on this season, which is one of the number one favorites. It's always on everybody's top 5 list. Some of them at number 1. And it's number 1 on my listing as well. And supposedly out there's a sequel being made or pitched years later. And it's starring the actual actress that played the little girl, and now she's an adult. Of course, it's called Mannos, The Hand of Fate, with the short Hired, which is the second part, Hired, which part 1 was on The Bride of the Monster, which is the episode prior to that. And if you haven't seen the Mannos Hand of Fate, there are several versions of it, of the Riff version. There's the Mystery Science Theater, and Rifftrack has a standard one and a live Rifftracks, which they do this. And all of them are fantastic to watch. It is a fantastic, with the great quirk characters that are in this movie. And not to go into the plot of it, it's not worth telling you the plot. Go see it. Just get a moment, catch it, because it's undescribable. And it's a horrible movie. It's horribly made, but it works with the Rifftracks. It's well worth seeing. See, that's the one thing about this. Mystery Science Theater has brought forward movies that generally most people wouldn't even watch. They wouldn't even give the time of day to. I mean, some of the older stuff, yeah, some people went to watch it. In this day era, where basically, we're watching on streaming apps, people will pass by these movies. Mystery Science Theater gave you that chance to watch it in their sphere of comedic genius. So it is a good way of doing that. So that was Mannos, Hands of Fate. Now going into season 5. Now season 5 is going to be a bit of a split, even though we're going to give you 2. Season 5 happens to be the last season for Joel Hodgson, and he's replaced by Mike Nelson. And I'm going to give you the 2, but one from Joel Hodgson and one from Mike Nelson. Obviously, the one I'm going to give you from Joel Hodgson will be his last episode on the show. and it happens to be Mitchell. That's right. It's the 75 movie Mitchell, starring Joe Don Baker, and it's a wild. It's like sort of a Dirty Harry on acid, really. I would have to say, it happens to be really fun, and the back storyline on the Mitchell is basically it's Joel Hodgson escaped from the Satellite of Love, which basically Gypsy is planning through the whole entire episode. So you know you have a little bit of this and that's going on in the background, and then you have Mitchell going on. The movie that the second movie on here, this one is a real weird one. You know, there's so many others I could have gave, but this is the one it just happens to be on there. It has the short Cheating on here. It's called The Wild World of Batwoman. Nothing to do with DC Comics. It's 1966. They said it's a comedy superhero, directed by Jerry Warren and Catherine Victor as Batwoman. It's just totally mindless insanity on this movie, but it is a great riff. It is one of the great riffs on there. I mean, the season 5 happens to be one of the best riff ones because they gave so much into season 5, and especially with the changeover, the change of guard from Hodgson to Nelson. It is some really good stuff on there. I mean, check out the whole 5th season, but Batwoman and Mitchell will be the two best, in my case, on there. Season 6. There's a whole mess we could do on here. But we're gonna have to go with the Italian movies for the first one. Danger Death Ray, the Italian Euro spy starring Gordon Scott. Happens to be you could take a guess, it's the stealing of a death ray. And the shooting scenes on here are just, the fight scenes are just way over the top. And I'm talking way over the top insane. I mean, I don't know who put the choreography on here, but basically in any other regular film they should have been fired. But in the case of this kind of a classification, well worth the watch. The other one happens to be a favorite of mine. This genre is a favorite. I have a bunch of these on DVD and VHS. And this happens to be from Mexico. And it's one of my favorites, ongoing series that they have there. In fact, I don't know if they've made any new ones recently, but there are some in the newer range with the sons that have taken over the mantle of this, and that's Santos versus the Vampire Women. That's right, wrestling meets vampires. That's right. There's some great, the Vampire Women's not the only one. They have one with the werewolf, Frankenstein, the mummy. There's all variations of this. It's always the same character. It's a wrestler by the name of Santos, and basically on the title line, you'll find this as Samson versus the Vampire Women, but it's actually Santo. I'm Spanish, and that's the original translation of it. But yeah, he's a wrestler that basically you get a wrestling match in there, and then he goes to visit a friend, and the friend is always in trouble. And in this case, the wrestler basically has to fight off vampires from trying to kidnap this woman who wants, of course, obviously, to drink her blood. And this happens to be the last episode for Frank Conniff. He leaves the series after this one. It's his last, this. I love how they brought him off on this one. And this is when they start to do, bring in other characters to the show. Pearl Forrester becomes a regular on this. You start to see the changes, especially as you're going into season 7. Now, in season 7, which happens to be the shortest season, it's only 6 episodes. But I'm still going to give you 2. One, I think it's well worth. It's one of the great horror movies of all time, and that's The Incredible Melting Man. And that one is 1977, written and directed by William Sass. It's about an astronaut comes back from Earth. He's exposed to radiation and he begins to melt and becomes this violent monster. Yes, how much can we riff on that? But it is a classic. I mean, it works with and without the tracks. It's a B movie. It's a great B movie. It's always well worth it. The other one is another one that works it with and without, and it's also, and this happens to be the last episode with Tracy Blue as Professor Forrester, and it is the last, and this is why we had a short season on this, it's the last episode on Comedy Central. And that is Laser Blast, 1978 science fiction about a kid who finds a weapon, and the weapon starts to take over his mind and becomes this mindless zombie to this weapon and starts blowing everything up. Still a great B movie. Special appearances by Roddy McDowall in this. It's a great movie, with and without the riff tracks. But hey, listen, watch the riff track. It's always going to be a funny way to watch it. Then, of course, in 1996, you had This Island Earth. That split it up in between. That's the 1955 movie. We said that before. That was sort of the break in between. Then we get into season 8. And there are a lot of changes to this. Bill Corbett becomes Crow T. Robot on this. It's the first appearance of Professor. This season you had Professor Bobo. Pearl Forrester takes over as the main lead, the evil scientist lead. And there are a lot of changes that go on. And you see this, the storyline changes. There's a time segment and all that. And then there's the return back to Earth afterwards. There's a whole segment on here that's going from one to another as far as this series. The two here that for this season, it's got to go to one which happens to be a Toei production, Japan, Prince of Space, or the Chicken Man from Mars, whatever you want to call it on here. This is a great, it's part of a superhero TV series from Toei Films, which ran for about a year, total 49 episodes. This happened to be one of them. Prince of Space is fantastic. It's well worth the watch. It is very funny. There is another Toei one, which is Invasion of the Neptune Men. That's another one in there. But the second one I want to mention on here, and some people do know this one, and it is a great cult one, is the Space Mutiny with Reb Brown and Cameron Mitchell and John Philip Law. I mean, talk about a movie that basically, when you rip certain things off as far as special effects, I mean, hell, they ripped off a crap load of stuff from Battlestar Galactica for this movie. And Reb Brown, what can you say with Reb Brown and some of the other characters in this movie? Oh, it's another one that is just, you just don't want to describe it, you got to see it. It's very important you see this. If any of all the ones that are on this list, besides Mannos Hand of Fate and Space Mutiny, those are the two ones you got to see. Because Space Mutiny is just totally way over the top for a movie. And the riff is perfect on this. All right, the two for season 9. It's got to go to Puma Man, the Italian movie. About a guy with special powers. Start with Donald Pleasant as being the villain in this. And Donald Pleasant's always a good villain in these movies. You remember, this is the guy who played Blofeld in one of the James Bond movies. You Only Live Twice. Yeah, You Only Live Twice. That's the one. And like I said, this is Italian. Italian superheroes, over the top, Always known for years on that. But the second movie is the one to really focus on. It's the 1996 movie Werewolf. This is a total insane horror film starring the younger brother of Martin Sheen, Joel Estevez. I have to laugh at that. I mean, I have to go back and watch this. I really, now that we're talking about this, I do have to go back and watch this movie. Because it is just insane. No, let's not call it insane. Just bat shit crazy. Just total batshit crazy. Let's call it in that Saturday. So it's Puma Man for season 9 and Werewolf. Those two on there. Even though there's some other good up there. Well, we're coming down to the end of the line here soon here. So in the season 10 category, this happens to be the last of technically the older series. Before the break in between, where basically the series is no longer around, and then the Kickstarter campaign starts up. This season, there's a lot of good ones in here. There are really a lot of good ones. I mean, the whole 10 seasons were really good. This was in 99 where this ended. But let's put this in the two categories in here. The Blood Waters of Dr. Z. Or Zat. Some people call it Zat. The Blood Waters Dr. Z. It is a mad scientist film from the 70s. They're not so known people in the movie. It's also known as Attack of the Swamp Creatures, was also known as this movie. It's also been cited as one of the worst movies ever made. Period. You know, the creature effects on here are just batshit insane. I love saying that now, batshit insane. Batshit insane. The plot line is just, it's hard to stomach, but the riffs make it right on target. Now, the last one for this whole series, and it could have been down to 4 here, and it has to be Diabolic. Danger Diabolic, the 68 Italian comic book. You know, like I said, comic book superheroes! It is a fantastic comic hero series. It is fantastic. It's done by Angela and Luciana Gusani. The cast itself is just... John Philip Law is in this, if you know him from Barbarella. Marissa Mel, and there's a couple other people. There's no one really major in there unless you know the Italian film genre. The funny part about this, the movie is directed by Mario Bava. You know him from his films, and it was produced also by Dino De Laurentiis. You know his movies as well. So this is one to catch. I mean, really one to catch under a riff, because it's an insane movie, and it's well worth the watch. It's really well worth the watch.